But let's check in across the country right now. We're going to talk about Georgia here in just a second, but let's start with Ohio State in terms of these quarterback battles. Devin Brown and Kyle McCord going toe-to-toe for the QB1 job in Columbus, and it is essentially vying to take over a Ferrari of an offense because you got Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, you got Travion Henderson behind you, and Mayan Williams, you got Emeka Egbuka. Like, whoever takes over the Ohio State quarterback spot is going to be in really good shape and likely help themselves to have a chance to get drafted pretty highly, as it tends to be the case for Ohio State quarterbacks. Now, Kyle McCord was the only individual from this quarterback battle to play in the spring game. Devin Brown, like the week of, we find out he has to get surgery on a finger on his throwing hand, so he's not going to play in the spring game, but he's going to be ready for fall camp. So Kyle McCord, the stage is set, right? Chance to just go out and knock it out of the park. And he kind of led for the duration of spring practice. It was kind of his job to lose, is what the buzz was around Columbus. And this was his chance to, in my opinion, slam the door shut. Like, he goes out there, he goes 25 for 20 and 3 touchdowns. We're all saying, yep, this is probably Kyle McCord's job, just a matter of time. And that wasn't the case. Went out there, went 18 for 34, 184 yards and 1 touchdown. So if you're an Ohio State fan, you're saying, oh, gosh, we're this close to having our guy for the rest of summer and into the fall. Like, you would have had direction as an Ohio State fan. You would have had direction. I'll take it a step further. If you're a player on that team, you know who your quarterback one is probably going to be. Now, the door is cracked open, and Devin Brown, being as talented as he is, has a chance to really make a statement. You hate that if you're Kyle McCord. You hate that that was your chance to win the job, in my humble opinion, and officially, unofficially end the battle. And now you got to wear it into the fall. Now, to be clear, Ryan Day, I wholeheartedly believe, would have let this go into the fall either way, but we could have had a pretty good feel for it should Kyle McCord have made a statement in that kind of spring game. Really quickly, make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate all that tuned in right now. Make sure you're liking the video. And shout out to everybody on podcasts, too. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to the Hard Count. We appreciate y'all rocking with us. Okay, now, Georgia. The Dogs, we talked about it with Aaron Murray just a few moments ago. This kind of has the inverse feel of how the Ohio State quarterback battle could have gone in that spring game. Came into it. Carson Beck has been the leader all camp, but Brock Vandagriff's making some moves in these last couple practices. And don't forget Gunnar Stockton. He's going to factor in somehow. And all that happens was Carson Beck goes out there and just chucks every single box. He went full-on Coach Yost. Remember the Titans. Left no doubt. They'll start with the field test. Like, just how does it feel when your quarterback's in the game? What were you anticipating when you saw Carson Beck taking snaps for Georgia? I'll tell you this, when he was running the offense, it felt a whole lot like he was in complete control of the vehicle. He knew where to go with the football. You just felt like something good was going to happen. He was going to push the ball downfield. He put the ball in the right spot. It felt like every single time. The field test for the Georgia offense, when he was at quarterback, you felt direction, you felt purpose. The eye test, like I just said a second ago, he was surgical. Every single time he was clicking through the reads, knew exactly where to go. It was never a matter of him ever looking like he was flustered or out of control or in over his head. Every single time. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3, we're going to the right spot with the ball. That was Carson Beck for you all day long. And then, let's talk about this. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Let's check the stats. Had the best statistical day of all the quarterbacks. Went 15 for 22, 231 yards, 1 touchdown. Meanwhile, Brock Vandagriff still had a good day. I mean, he ran the ball pretty effectively. 13 for 25, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. But again, I'm talking about this number with Carson Beck. He also looked the best against the one defense. I think he went something like 13 for 18 against the best defense in the country. So similar to what I think could have happened at Ohio State with Kyle McCord being unofficially, officially the starting quarterback, I think that's what happened at Georgia. Aaron Murray said it. I'm telling you it once again. Carson Beck, barring something wildly unforeseen, will be the starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs when they get rolling. Now, a lot of people are going to watch what Brock Vandagriff does. At the time of us being live right now, the latest intel we have is that he's going to pray about it. I'm going to kind of talk to the family about it. And, I mean, just to be clear, Kirby Smart hasn't publicly named Carson Beck the starter. Okay, this is still something where Brock Vandagriff can come back in the fall and really try and challenge. But, again, that portal window is only open for so long. Brock Vandagriff could challenge and stick around and hope he gets a shot at Georgia, or he could go somewhere and play today. I'm just saying we'll keep an eye on that if Carson Beck does end up being named quarterback 1. Now, let's talk about another school here. had their spring game this past, I guess it was Thursday. That's the Florida Gators. Going into it, you kind of felt like it was Graham Mertz's job to lose. That was the feel because you brought him in for a reason, right? Transfer from Wisconsin, tons of talent, really highly recruited, just never really got into a rhythm at Wisconsin, kind of turnover prone. But everyone at Florida is thinking, hey, we brought him here for a reason. He's probably going to be the guy, right? Well, the good news is the defense looked pretty good. The bad news is quarterbacks did not separate by any stretch of the imagination. Final score was like 10-7, which if you're a fan of offensive football, that ain't great. Jack Miller, I thought looked really impressive from what I saw. I mean, the fact that he is able to do so much with his legs kind of looked like the potential wild card for him in this battle. I mean, that might end up being a little bit more important than we might have perceived it to be at the beginning of this thing. I think Jack Miller is very seriously a part of this quarterback battle. Because originally that storyline was out there that Billy Napier's saying, hey, open competition between Jack Miller and Graham Mertz. As a Florida fan, you're saying, man, really? Graham Mertz, we brought you here from Wisconsin. You can't beat out Jack Miller, a guy who looked beyond lackluster in the game against Oregon State in their bowl game. And then you have a spring game on him from a season ago. He didn't look great there. You're saying, man, really? Well, hey, I think it's time to put some respect on Jack Miller's name. Jack Miller, I think, made a very good case for himself that he has, I think, one, elevated himself, and two, if he does end up being your starting quarterback, he will have won it based on merit. It won't have just been a thing of, well, Graham Mertz kind of still needed some time to process the offense. Like, hey, if that's the way it goes, it's the way it goes. But I think Jack Miller looked really impressive in that spring football game. Now, statistically, he was a touch more efficient than Graham Mertz was, but Graham Mertz was 18 for 29, 244 yards and a touchdown. Jack Miller, 10 for 19, $144 and 1 touchdown. So, again, neither one of them lighting it up. A lot of people around Gainesville feel like there is a more than likely chance that Florida dips their toe back into the transfer portal pool if the right guy were to jump into the portal for them. So we'll see what happens there. You don't love what you saw in that spring game. I would just say this, let it marinate a little bit. Let it bake a little bit. I would also say that whenever it comes to the fall, whichever one of these guys ends up being your starting quarterback, I think they'll call the offense and tailor the offense a little bit more so to their skill set. Whereas right now, I think they're just calling it even. So keep an eye on that. Now, here's the one that is kind of making me cringe just a little bit. We said this since they opened spring camp, but the Texas Longhorns, they had quarterback competition internally. And I mean, they were pushing each other. They were getting better. There was never a quarterback battle in my mind. I've said this a couple times. I'll keep it brief. Reporter asked Steve Sarkisian, is a quarterback position open? Steve Sarkisian, on the first day of spring football, wanting to promote competition within his team, says, yes, all positions are open, which is just good coach speak, to be honest with you. What is he supposed to say in that scenario? Obviously, Quinn Ewers comes out in the spring game, looks like an improved version of himself. I believe he went 16 for 23, $195. Really could have had 2 touchdowns, but one of the deep passes was to set up a red zone rushing touchdown for Cedric Baxter. Anyway, Quinn Ewers was then named the starter after the spring football game. The reason why we're including this into the segment is not because of the starting quarterback battle. I don't think that was ever a battle. What I think we got to talk about here is that spot for QB2. Because everyone was kind of assuming, myself included, hey, Arch Manning is going to develop, going to look halfway decent in the spring football game and walks out there, looked like a freshman, okay, to be clear, looked like a freshman and was trying to get his feet under him, and we'll talk more about that in a second here. Malik Murphy, I think, made a statement. 9 for 13, 165 yards, 1 touchdown, like he was dealing. Really could have had more yards. He had 1 deep pass on a post route that his receiver dropped that was right in the breadbasket. Like Malik Murphy, I think had kind of been forgotten about in that Texas quarterback room. And very casually just walks into the spring game, has a day, and reminds everybody, hey, I was pretty highly recruited at one point in time too. Has struggled to really be healthy, hadn't really gotten a full spring at Texas. And to do what he did to put that kind of resume together during the spring game, I think that battle for the QB2 spot is really something to watch. Now, you have a lot of people around college football media saying, well, hey, does Malik Murphy maybe take this spring game and parlay it into a QB1 spot somewhere else? Again, a lot of people want quarterbacks these days, so keep an eye on that. But if Malik Murphy is to stay, I think he's got a very strong case to be that QB2. Now, I'll say this, though. Arch Manning is not going to stay stagnant by any stretch of the imagination. He is going to be somebody that I think only gets better. Listen, a lot of people, we'll talk about this in a second here in our next segment. A lot of people are making just definitive opinions on Arch Manning based on 15 practices and what you got to see in one spring game. If you think that's as good as Arch Manning's going to be, 5 for 13 and 30 yards, you got another thing coming. Okay, Malik Murphy's been in the system longer, been a college football player longer. Arch Manning just got to campus, lost his ID twice. Texas fans, you cringe at hearing me say that because the ID thing is just such low-hanging fruit. But listen, low-hanging fruit for a reason. The reality is for Texas, they're going to probably have some options at that QB2 spot. And in my humble opinion, as a football team, you're only as good as your backup quarterback because football is so physical. It is so difficult to go wire to wire with the same starting quarterback. Now, we hope that's the case for Texas. We hope Quinn Ewers is able to go the distance this season. But I think you feel pretty good if you're Texas playing either Malik Murphy or Arch Manning at QB2. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Ohio State, Georgia, Florida, and Texas all having quarterback battles of their own. Now, don't get it twisted. Texas is definitely not for the QB1 spot, but that QB2 spot, I think, is fascinating. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.